Daily Spark listeners. I know you can hear the excitement in my voice as I am about to introduce our next speaker for this special Daily Spark episode. Today we have Richard Cohen. Richard Cohen shares his most precious experience with young children at a Thanksgiving gathering, sitting at the children's table. Talking to children at eye level is a fun and joyful way to communicate. Little did Richard realize that the eye-level roundtable experience would be the beginning of his early childhood teaching career. Richard shares his struggles before and after receiving his teaching degree and why he had to relocate to another state. He talks about the important ways to teach the diverse learner and why the use of verbal learning is an asset to use in the classroom. His views about play as a form of motivation in the classroom are awesome. This is a must-listen-to interview for new teachers to learn the value of building a long-lasting relationship with parents.
Hi, Richard Cohen. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Rose. How are you?
Great. We're doing great. Our listeners are so excited to have you on our show today. So let's get started.
Okay.
Tell me about the moment you realized you wanted to educate young children.
Well, there wasn't one moment. When I was a teenager, I was a babysitter and a camp counselor. I was one of those folks that was just kind of a natural with little kids. Every Thanksgiving or family holiday, long after I was supposed to sit at the kids' table, I kept sitting at the kids' table because I would much rather be around young children than the boring grown-ups who were sitting at the grown-up table. And so I was just kind of a natural at it. So I can't tell you that there was one moment. It's just always kind of been a part of my fiber of who I am.
Oh, your fiber. So that invisible child came out.
He never left.
He never left. Okay.
That's right.
Okay. What was the vision that you had for yourself when you started?
Well, I guess I would also back up and just share with you a little bit more of my story, which is that even though I always knew that I loved and would be great with young children, that wasn't my initial career goal. I went to New York University Film School. My dream was to be a famous film director. And I moved out to Hollywood and started working in the film industry back in the 80s. And while I was doing that, I had to make money on the side in between films or TV episodes that I was, working on. And I found myself working with young children as an adult, sort of for the first time at a children's gym. And there was such a difference between the kind of, I'll just call it, for me anyway, my experience of it as a very young man, of the sort of dark and kind of nasty entertainment industry that I was finding myself in. And then I would go spend my days with young children and their families. And it was so fun and full of joy that I decided to change plans and go back and get my bachelor's and ultimately my master's degree in early childhood education, and dropped my filmmaking plan. And it was the best decision I ever made. To answer your question, though, at that point, as a young man, my vision was that it was going to be a simple and fun life, playing with young children and having a good time. I learned pretty quickly that there was a lot more to it than that. But at that point, that was all I thought it was going to be about.
It reminds me of a quote that Fred Rogers once said. It says, "Play gives children a chance to practice what they are learning." So if they're learning, just the simple things in life, how to, run, jump, and skip, when they're learning to play, and play just, expands it more, it makes it more enjoyable.
Yes,
And
indeed.
adults need to, just relax sometime and just learn how to play and laugh and, just enjoy life. So I
Yeah.
can understand what you're saying.
Mr. Rogers is one of my heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been lucky enough to spend my life playing, and not just playing, but also learning about why play is important.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 10 and 15 years, reading the research on what happens in children's brains as they play and how we can use play to maximize their learning. And so play has become more than just fun for me. It's become a greatly researched subject I'm quite passionate about.
Yes, yes. And a lot of teachers need to, especially beginning teachers, new teachers, need to learn the importance of play in the classroom.
They sure do. Some of them think, and, bless their hearts.
Yes.
Some of them think, that their job is to make sure that children learn their colors and letters and numbers and shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that's the extent of their job. And what I always say to those folks is, if that's what you believe your job is, you're playing a very small game.
Mm-hmm.
You don't yet realize the tremendous impact that you have on the lives of little human beings that have only been on the planet for maybe 1,000 days. And you can teach them their colors and letters and numbers and shapes, but you can also help introduce them to what it means to be a human being.
Yes.
In all of its various aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And although it sometimes seems counterintuitive, because we grown-ups think we need to control what children are learning,
mm-hmm.
and so we want to do things like use flashcards and worksheets and
mm-hmm.
things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is, when we let them play,
mm-hmm.
and we know how to facilitate their play
yes.
Skillfully,
mm-hmm.
More parts of their brains light up, and we can get all of those colors and letters and numbers and shapes, basic goals handled, mm-hmm. and contribute so much more lasting impacts to their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Just with that skill of learning of knowing that it's important to give them the time and the space and the materials to play with,
yes.
and also the best ways to facilitate their play.
Yes.
And then you will have made a real difference in their lives.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that's misunderstood about new teachers is that once they make out their lesson plan,
right.
their planning, they feel that they have to follow that step by step. But they need to know also that it's okay to drift, away from that and then come back to it. Because if the child asks you a question, you have to be able to answer that. You have to be able to work with the child at the age and I should say the questions that they are answering, because that's the way their brain is, working. They need to know that question, the answer to that question right away in order to proceed in
yes.
the, next steps. So I think
yep.
a lot of teachers, young teachers, need to understand that, and that it's okay.
Well, what I'm hearing you talk about is flexibility.
Yes.
And that is a key skill of an
mm-hmm.
effective early childhood professional, is the ability to be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I would say this as well. When I was going to school in the mid 80s, what we were taught at that point in time was to make our lesson plans based on themes. And,
right. mm-hmm.
September is family, and October is community helpers,
mm-hmm.
and we have a letter of the week and a color and a shape and all those things. And it doesn't matter what the children are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
We follow those lesson plans.
Yes.
And so if you, for example, Rose, when you were 3 years old, if you loved birds,
mm-hmm.
And wanted to go look at the birds and draw pictures of birds.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, I was taught to say to you, I know you like birds, but right now, our theme is the farm. So can you tell me the sound a cow makes?
Yeah.
But now,
mm-hmm.
what's happened between then and now, more than anything, has
mm-hmm.
been the the birth of neuroscience, or the growth of neuroscience, and our ability to scan brains and understand which parts and when and how much they sort of light up. And so now when we plan curriculum for young children, we don't do that. We don't plan our themes and then sort of squish the children into it. Instead, what we do, or what we try to do, is build a relationship with every child and their family, find out what excites them, and then go design our curriculum around whatever's most meaningful for them.
Right.
And that's a completely different way of teaching than how I was taught back in my early days.
Yes, me also. One thing I found fascinating is like when I introduce nature to my children, I'm just amazed how many of them have sensory issues. And I did a lesson on the butterfly, the stages of the butterfly. And they just learn so much about, math and different colors of the butterflies. And it was good because like I did it in the beginning of the school year.
Right.
And it helped build a relationship between, the child and I, and also the parent, because the parent would come back to me and say that the child loves school because of the butterflies. They could relate to that. And even now I can go back and say, remember the butterfly when we learned this? And I use it as a calming effect. Like it's part of my social and emotional, Remember how the butterfly felt? How do you feel? The butterfly was soft. How do you feel? Do you feel hard or do you feel soft? It's just those little things, that the child can relate to. And, I'm just thankful that the teachers now are bringing more nature into the classroom and even taking, walks outside and talking about, the trees, the leaves on the trees, the different colors. So
yes,
this
indeed.
This is a beautiful time for teachers to be in the teaching field.
Yes, I would agree.
Yes.
And as for nature, I would also just add, I love hearing what you just said in the story you told about the butterfly. I love how you took some complex ideas like emotions and made them concrete for a young mind by using words like hard and soft. That's really a brilliant example of what we call developmentally appropriate practice. But I would also add that as we sit here in 2017, there's a term out there called ecophobia. And there's a phenomenon now of, since the introduction of cell phones and tablets and video games and all that, children spend very, very little time out in the natural world. And so they become phobic or even afraid of nature.
Yes.
And yet you so eloquently explained how something as simple as a butterfly can not only be used for cognitive goals like math or reading, but the social and emotional, particularly the emotional experience we all have of the natural world. It's so terribly important and so very threatened. And what's frightening about that is that in a blink of an eye, these little ones who generally speaking, in America anyway, don't have a deep connection to the natural world. In a blink of an eye, they're going to be the adults making laws and voting and policies, and we'll be in the old folks' home, you and I, depending on them. And they'll be adults who don't have, memories and experiences of caring for the natural world.
Yes.
Right at a time in the future when the natural world is going to need advocates to help save it more than ever.
You're right.
So I'm thrilled to hear what you did with that butterfly.
Yes. So, yes, thank you for sharing that.
Sure. Sorry, I get very passionate when I get on.
Oh, so do I. I get very passionate, especially when it comes to children and teaching them and just helping them to grow in different areas.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you, what was the most challenging part about being an educator?
Well, when I began as a young man, when I was 21 or 22, when I transitioned over from my old career thought it would be my career in filmmaking, it was the fact that I was younger than the parents of the children that I cared for, and that I didn't have any children of my own. Okay. And they would sort of say, why do I have to listen to you?
Yeah.
Now, throughout my career, I will say that one of my greatest challenges have been the parents. Okay. But what I also learned, and, no one ever through all my bachelor's courses and master's courses, there were never any classes on how to work with parents. And I had to learn the hard way, and come to really realize that if I wanted to make a lasting impact on the lives of those young children, I almost needed to expend more of my time and energy educating and nurturing the parents than the children themselves.
Yes.
That was a huge lesson for me. Now, in terms of today's world that we live in, what I think is the biggest challenge for myself and for others as educators is that, for better or for worse, we find ourselves in a data-driven society where funding is all dependent, educational funding is all dependent on the data that we produce about children. And so these teachers out there, especially my friends in the Head Start programs and elsewhere, are so burdened with paperwork and spending time. Now, spending time observing and documenting young children's behavior is important. Yes. But the amount for which teachers today are responsible for doing it is disturbing, because it's taking a great deal of time away from actually playing with and interacting with the kids. And so, for me to say what I think is the greatest challenge for teachers today, it's the sheer amount of documentation we have to do that takes us away from all of our other important responsibilities, being there with the children.
Yes, I agree with you. And so much of it now has to be put on the computer, and and a lot of the teachers have to use, there's special time away from the classroom time to do this, because so many of us have deadlines to meet. And
that's right.
Yeah.
And, in a related matter, we're a very underpaid profession, right? We're not, early childhood professionals don't receive worthy wages. And so what that means is, to me, or one aspect of what that means, is that it tends to attract a lot of really lovely, nice, sweet, caring people. But many of them come from poverty themselves, and specifically don't have computer skills.
Yes.
And so, just to kind of respond to what you were saying about using the computer, one of the challenges is that some of our greatest early educators out there have all the skills they need to do well with young children, but they lack the computer skills. Yes. And become very frustrated with that newly important aspect of our work.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's so true. And speaking of parents, I think the parents really appreciate us as teachers, because so many of them do not have parenting skills.
It's true.
And I think they rely on us for advice. And I think the biggest challenge for them is that they don't know how to approach us to ask for, advice. What do I do when my child doesn't want to, go to bed at 8 o'clock?
Right.
Just simple things like that. So,
well, and I teach right now. Currently, I teach at St. Louis Community College in Ferguson, Missouri.
Okay.
And there's, just being in Ferguson, there's quite a few stories to tell about what we've been through in our community in recent years since the shooting of Michael Brown. But in any case, my point was that I teach a class called Family Teacher Interactions. And one of the main points I try to make in that class with these young teachers is that what you just said, which is parents don't know how to approach us, is absolutely spot on. And so the teachers need to learn the skills of how to be proactive,
Right.
how to approach the parents first,
Mm-hmm.
let the parents know that we're here for you,
Mm-hmm.
we're a safe harbor,
Mm-hmm.
we're offering parent education opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
we want to be your partner, we want to help you
Mm-hmm.
as you struggle to figure out, you the parent, you finally get figured out how to work with your toddler, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly they're a preschooler. And everything you learned is no longer relevant anymore because they're in a new developmental stage.
You're right.
And these poor parents, they didn't have to take any classes to become a parent.
Right,
So
right.
they don't know. We have to take the time to reach out to them and not wait for them to ask us for help.
You're right. That's true. And one thing I do is I invite the parents into the classroom.
Yes.
And whatever skill they have, no matter how simple it is, I encourage them to share it with the students, and I praise them, and I, have the children, make them a thank you card. And, that just, it just builds the relationship. And I found that works throughout the school year. I do it. So
Absolutely.
yes,
If you're a carpenter, if you're a baker, if you're a
yes,
seamstress,
yeah,
if you love to read, whatever it is,
oh
bring it
yeah,
into our
yeah.
classroom.
Yes, especially when the
we-
parents tell me they have no talent. I said, well, what is your favorite book? And they share that with me. And I'm like, well, read it to the kids. And they find that the kids are just so fascinated with the way that they, present their book. Because when everybody reads, they present the book in a different way. And,
Yes.
I just encourage the parents to, if they can't do anything else, just read, And then once they start reading, they start realizing their other talents. Like, some of them can draw. So
That's right.
Yeah.
So you're not only helping the children, you're helping, these parents come to realizations about themselves, that they are capable of greater things than even they realized. You sound like a wonderful teacher, Rose.
Oh, thank you. And I agree with you, because a lot of the parents, no one ever told them that, they were, great, or they were good at this, or they
That's
had
right.
this skill. So
That's right.
some of them find themselves growing as their child is growing, on
Absolutely.
their different talents. So it's good. So, I like it too, because, like teaching also, it's because it teaches children and parents, how to grow and how to appreciate each other. And,
Yeah.
Not only is it in the classroom, but the parents and the child, they take this home and they share it. And it's part of appreciating each other, showing love for each other. And, that's what life is all about,
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Some people think their job is simply to teach colors and letters and numbers and shapes. And you don't realize that you literally have the power to impact families' home lives that you may never see. But
Yes.
through the way we do our job as early educators, we can, help to improve the connectedness of families within their own homes, even though we may never see that with our own eyes.
Yes, yes. And just to tell you a quick story, I had a student like 5 years ago that
Yeah.
I did some things some personal things for. And then, the student got older, and we just kind of drift away from each other. And then I had another teacher come to me, and we were just talking, and she said, "Oh, did you teach at this such and such a school?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And she went back, and the parent of this child that I did so many things for, it just comes natural when you're a teacher. You do things naturally. And then she came back, and she praised me for it. And I'm like, wow, that was so many years ago. And I'm
Right.
just thankful, that I did it. Even though, like I said, as a teacher, it came natural. But, people just appreciate things that you do for them.
Yeah. But that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the story you just told from my perspective, is not the norm. Most of us in early childhood, we don't get that moment where we hear back from them years later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of Facebook, I actually do get to keep in touch with some of my old preschoolers and kindergartners who are now in their 30s, and I'm still in touch with some of their parents, and I'll get invited to their weddings and things. But in general, I guess the point I'm heading towards is to say that early childhood education, or to be an early childhood professional, is really a leap of faith, because you don't always get that feedback years later that what you did made a difference.
Yes.
Especially for infant and toddler caregivers.
Mm.
You know, you may have an adult who will come back and find a high school teacher and say, thank you, Mrs. Smith, because you were such a great English teacher. I'm a lawyer now. But you rarely, if ever, have someone come back and find, the person who was changing your diapers as your infant caregiver and go back and tell them, hey, because you were talking nonstop while you were changing my diaper, I'm literate now and I know how to read and write.
Yes.
And you started me on that journey.
Yes.
So early childhood is really a leap of faith. You have to trust that what you're doing makes a difference, because you don't always get that feedback like you got in your story, and I get sometimes on Facebook.
Yeah. Before I began exploring early childhood development, I just thought that every child developed the same. And at the same time, and in point in their development. And that it would just become natural, and that it would just catch up with them. And that the child would have the different stages of development in place by first grade, but that doesn't help it. That doesn't happen. And I did not understand that the circumstances and the condition and the environment would dominate a toddler's life. And I learned that the poverty environment for a child will have less of a vocabulary than a child in a non-poverty environment. And then I started to study childhood development. And then I realized that I had the knowledge to change the emotion stages that was going on in a child's life. And once a child learns how to control his or her emotions, they can move on and learn things that can add value to their life.
Yes, indeed.
So, yeah.
When Head Start was originally conceived, in the 60s, the whole concept behind what would give a child a head start for kindergarten was their social and emotional development.
Yes.
And the Head Start programs were focused on the social and emotional skills in order to give the child a head start. And unfortunately, in the last couple of decades, since the rise of No Child Left Behind and Common Core, we have mistakenly, Head Start and others have mistakenly come to think that what gives the child the head start is the academics. And in fact, you're absolutely right. It's if you focus on the social emotional skills in the earliest years, the rest will come when it's needed. And by the way, when you talked about the vocabulary gap between children of poverty and children of affluence, do you know the number of words difference? Have you heard the number?
I think it's like 300, 500, something like that.
It's the 30 million word gap.
Wow.
Yeah. There's two things. One is the number of words that children of poverty are exposed to. They spend less time around adults who are simply using more words around them. So that's part of it. They're exposed to less vocabulary. But the other part is that research shows that children of poverty tend to experience more instances of harsh or negative words than children of affluence.
Oh, yes.
And all of that adds up to a tremendous difference in vocabulary and literacy skills through no fault of their own. Then they find themselves later on down the road struggling with not only reading and writing, but other areas in their school lives and elementary school and beyond.
Yes. They have a lot of hatred, and they're mean. Those students are mean, I find out. And it just makes you want to love them more, because
Yeah,
of that
they can be. And
poverty environment. Yes.
but I'll say again that you and I don't know each other, but what you just said is a really good indicator to me of what a wonderful teacher you are, because not every student will respond to that meanness with compassion and kindness and love, like you just said. Some don't have the wisdom that you have, and they haven't yet figured out that what that child needs more than anything else is not meanness in return, but compassion and love and support and care.
Yes. Okay. Can you give me your views on compassion and love? How to show that to a preschooler? Different ways you would show that love?
Well, that's a really tricky subject because it's one of my favorite topics, and would that we had more time, I could go into it in a great deal of depth. There's nothing more important that we can do than love young children. And it's one of the greatest things about being an early childhood professional is that I get to love other people's children for a living and get paid for it. And that's pretty amazing. But it's also pretty tricky because as a professional, we have to be very careful about how we love other people's children. And so, being an early childhood professional, you have to walk a very fine line between who you are as a human being. You have to bring your humanity to work with you every day, but also the boundaries and the guidelines you have to set for yourself as a professional so that you don't overstep them with the ways that you might touch or care for or love a child or even a parent in the classroom. It becomes a very tricky line to walk. But yes, there's nothing more important than showing love. One of my heroes in this field is a woman who passed away last year named Bev Boss. She was my hero, my mentor, and my friend. And one of the things she always said is we don't need to praise children. We just need to give them our undivided attention. We just need to be there with them.
Yes.
And once they come to understand that they're worthy of our attention, they feel loved.
Oh, yes.
And
definitely.
that makes the biggest difference, more than, a throwaway phrase like, good job.
Yes.
To be there and give them your attention is a big part of how to love them.
Yes, I agree with you. And you don't always have to be verbal either. Just
That's
your
right.
presence, beside them. You could be playing with a puzzle together. And
That's
just the idea that, you're moving a piece of puzzle and it's being placed by their puzzle, that means so much to a child. And
It really does.
Yeah.
And, part of the problem is
without
that,
a cell phone being
what's that? I'm sorry.
I said so many of them are used to having someone working with them with a cell phone in their hand. So they just like that, attention. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. I
Yeah.
mean, we're in this crazy world where we have to have a conscious thought to give undivided attention and put that cell phone down, But, one of the challenges I think that comes to mind as I listen to you say what you just said is that we have a lot of lovely people in this field who are attracted to this field for one reason or another. And some of them don't know their own self-worth, some early childhood educators. And so this idea that my sitting next to a child doing a puzzle could really positively impact them is kind of beyond the thinking of some early childhood educators because they don't realize they don't realize their own value in the world. And so it doesn't occur to them that just sitting next to a child could make that much of a difference. And so part of my work across my career, in addition to all the content of child development and curriculum planning, is really helping to empower disempowered early childhood educators who, for whatever reason, haven't learned that they are extraordinary and valuable and worthy themselves.
Wow. Wow, I hear some emotional in your voice. What do you make of that?
Well, I try to walk through my life with a sense of gratitude and humility, and of the many things that I'm grateful for in my life. Having found the early childhood profession has transformed the story of my life. It's much more than a developmental stage. It's for me, early childhood is a way of being in the world, of being joyous and peaceful and respectful and loving. And who I am in the world as a person has been greatly determined by what I learned as an early childhood professional. And I feel so grateful for that and so humbled by, what fate handed me.
You seem so confident right now. Was it always like that? Always the case?
No, not as a young teacher, but long story short, I was teaching in Los Angeles, California, and lost my home in the Northridge earthquake in January 17th, 1994, and moved to Chicago and found myself without an Illinois teaching license certificate, and found a job teaching adults. And that was when I shifted into adult education. Okay. And in those first days, I was scared as heck and not confident at all. But now I've been doing it for, 25 or more years working with adults. And yeah, I have developed a sense of confidence about, the differences I'm able to make and the knowledge that I have and am able to share.
Oh, very good. I like that.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Do you have anything else you would like to add to this interview?
Well, I would love to just take a moment to say a little bit about myself and my work, if I may take a moment to do that.
Yes, you may.
Okay. Well, the work that I do with adults, with early childhood educators, has grown over the last 25, 30 years. And now I spend a great deal of time traveling around the world, and I get asked to deliver the keynote address at early childhood conferences. In fact, I'm getting on a plane in a few hours to go to Seattle, and it's someplace different next weekend. And so that's a big part of my career, and that work, or access to finding more about that work, can be found on richardcohen.com.
Okay.
But the other thing the other piece that sort of sprung up in this new world of social media is that I created a social media presence on Facebook, Pinterest, Tumblr, and Twitter called Zen and the Art of Early Childhood Education. And so anyone out there listening is welcome to go on to any of those social media platforms. But for example, on Facebook, you could just search for Art of Early Childhood and find my page and like it. And then every day you'll get, for free, of course, daily inspiration, humor, the latest research on early childhood development, news, all those good things. And it's been quite a pleasure to build that community of early educators all around the world who I get to teach and also learn a great deal from.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Thanks for sharing that. Now, listeners, you know where you can go to learn more about Richard Cohen. Thank you, Richard, for all your valuable information, and I wish you the best of success in your teaching and motivational speaking career.
Thank you so much, Rose. And I wish it right back at you. I have a feeling you and I are kindred spirits, and if there's ever anything more I can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you.